We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GBNews,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good evening and welcome to Headliners. I am Simon Evans. Very shortly, my comedy guest and myself will be taking you through Friday morning's newspapers. But first of all, here's the news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The government's Deputy Chief Whip has resigned following a drunken incident. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Christopher Pincher said, "Last night I drank far too much. I've embarrassed myself and others, which is the last thing I want to do, and for that I apologise to you and to those concerned. I think the right thing to do in the circumstances is for me to resign. I owe it to you and the people I've caused upset to do this." A mother, stepfather and teenager have all been given life sentences for the murder of a 5-year-old boy. Logan Mwangi's body was found in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Angharad Williamson, and stepfather John Cole were found guilty and jailed for life. They'll serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years respectively. 14-year-old Craig Mulligan will serve at least 15 years for killing his stepbrother. Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father. The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade in response to the threat posed by Russia. The UK also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit, Mr Johnson said we need to explode the myth that the alliance has provoked the conflict.
If you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Meanwhile, NATO's chief, Jens Stoltenberg, said the move to boost troop numbers in Eastern Europe will ensure Vladimir Putin doesn't miscalculate NATO's readiness to respond.
We also know that this can get worse, because if this becomes a full-scale war between Russia and NATO, then we'll see suffering, damage, death, destruction at a scale which is much, much worse than what we see in Ukraine today.
Russia has withdrawn its troops from a Ukrainian island in the Black Sea, which it captured at the beginning of its invasion. Ukraine hailed it as a strategic victory and says it drove Russian forces out of Snake Island after missile and artillery attacks. But the Kremlin says it withdrew its troops as a gesture of goodwill to allow grains to be shipped from Ukraine. Back to the UK, and airline passengers have hit out at the total chaos at Heathrow after the airport ordered 30 flights to be cancelled during the morning peak. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers, with some travellers only finding out their flights were cancelled when they arrived at the airport. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked onto alternative flights. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Simon and headliners.
Hello and welcome back to Headliners. Joining me tonight in the Headliners arena are comedians at the top of their game, Leo Kearse and Josh Howie, the dream team. Slightly too much blue cheese, but a dream nevertheless. Very nice to see you, gents. One of you's come from Ministry of Defence, I think.
Yeah, we're just filming that, so it's going to be broadcast on Saturday, 8 p.m.
You are currently Mr. GB News. You've got the double. And,
I'm Mrs. GB
Mrs.
News.
Yeah, Ms. Master GB News.
Ms. GB News.
It's 2022.
Who did you have on this week?
It was Lewis Schaefer, and on the other side, Dan Spencer, the regular captain, and Stephen Grant.
Stephen Grant and Lewis Schaefer, that is going to be a high... That's going to be like a high energy. That could be almost unbearably. Zingers ahoy. Excellent. Well, we've got a batch of front pages to take a look at. Let's see what's on the Telegraph's front page for Friday morning. The Tory whip quits over drunken groping. That is a major story we'll be going into very shortly. And one of our few remaining tennis hopes pictured there alongside it. Obviously a completely different story. Then we have on sterling as trade figure record. And Supreme Court delivers blow to Biden's climate pledge by curbing EPA powers. Typical, slightly confusing bad news from the FT. The Daily Mirror has top Tory quits over drunken groping claim and innocent lost in House of Evil. Again, that horrific story of child murder. The Sun with Tory whip quit over drunken gropes. MP Pincher's shame, bit of nominative determinism for him, and Taylor to wed Brit Joe, that is Taylor Swift, if I remember correctly. The Metro have Logan's teen murderer with some pride celebrations to offset the misery created by that story. And the Daily Star have zeroed in on Bernie Ecclestone's car crash interview on Breakfast TV this morning. Nurse Bernie's out of bed again. He was defending his old pal, Vladimir Putin. Loyalty, if nothing else. Those are the headlines. Let's have a look and see what's inside. So let's start off with that gruesome and grim story from tomorrow's Sun, Leo, and indeed elsewhere.
Yeah, so the Tory party deputy chief whip has sensationally quit tonight after allegedly drunkenly groping two men last night. So he's called Chris Pincher, which, as you point out, is nominative determinism. Don't hire somebody called Davy Buttock Grabber.
No, and then give him the whip as well.
They're letting him keep the whip, which he's been subject to a probe in previous years. I mean, the double entendres just keep coming. But yeah, it's the second time he's been forced to quit the whip's office over sex allegations. So in 2017, he was accused of making a pass at a former Olympic rower, like a pound shop Harvey Weinstein. That's Chris Pincher, not the rower. But yeah, he massaged this athlete and Tory activist's neck and whispered, you'll go far in the Conservative Party. So, yeah, quite creepy stuff. But some papers are referring to it as claims. The claims are coming from him. He's written a letter.
Yes.
So he's admitted to it.
Well, he certainly admitted he got terribly drunk last night, and other people have said that his behaviour was out of order. I didn't see anything in the letter in which he acknowledges what he did when he was drunk, but it sounds certainly as if you can join the dots.
Yeah, but it sounds like other Tory MPs dobbed him in, because it's a Tory members' club, and then...
Yeah.
So he was dobbed
the
in.
Carlton Club, isn't it?
And they're sort of saying, it looks like he's going to keep his whip because he admitted it, and he's fallen on his sword. It's like, yeah, but you've admitted it after. It's not like you woke up this morning and went, I'm just going to resign today. Last night was crazy. It's like they obviously got some complaints, and they was like, yeah, that was me.
Falling on his sword is another unfortunate. Do you feel that it's a crime that would be more suitable to resigning from causing a by-election? Is that what you're saying?
No, well, I mean, it's not. Certainly, this is the second time it's happened.
Yeah.
I mean, and this coming on the back of the other Tory MP who was found watching pornography.
Coming on the back of. You're just... I can't believe this. Am I being tested here? Is this some kind of... one of these guys who's going to lose his licence?
I wish that was intentional.
He shot someone else's by. Let's move on. We have another story from the front page. This is Russia waging war on the continent. Defence spending is on the agenda. They're looking to ramp it right up.
Yeah, so this story in The Guardian, it's been going actually for a couple of days because, at the beginning of the week, someone in number 10 said, we're probably not going to meet that 0.5% above inflation for the defence spending.
Yeah.
And then Boris Johnson was like, no, because it all kicked off. And now he's basically saying that it will increase to 2.5% of GDP by the end of the decade. So that's kind of like he's sort of promising... I mean, I wouldn't trust Boris Johnson to do a promise in 5 minutes, let alone keeping a promise for 8 years' time.
Well, it's certainly going to stretch beyond what is any reasonable expectation of his own tenancy at number 10, isn't
exactly.
it? But I suppose as a statement of intent, it's significant.
There are issues that are happening. You've got here the vital capabilities like future combat air. Which I'm not really sure what future combat air is. I'm assuming it's future air combat.
Sounds like a really good Korean film.
Yeah, I'll watch that.
Might be Prince Charles.
Yeah.
That might be Prince William, actually. I mean, the one thing, I saw a graph a couple of days ago, and it wasn't necessarily in anticipation of this particular conversation, but it was the extent to which defence spending has declined, especially since the end of the Cold War, essentially, since we felt we won that. And that has been a steady decline for about 30 years now. And at some point, you do go, well, is there almost anything left at all? I mean, it has been, it's really... And interestingly, it's almost all been spent on the NHS. The increase in spending on the NHS, which I know people don't believe, they think the NHS is being run deliberately into the ground, but the fact is more and more treatments come available that are very expensive. You go into hospitals now and they are often slightly dismal and they don't look as if they could do with a lick of paint, but on the other hand, there's some high-end equipment and some very expensive drugs and so on.
Yeah, and the NHS is great when you absolutely need them. They're great. They're not so good for the touchy-feely side things. And
so what I mean is, though, there's been a dividend. Reducing defence spending has given us a dividend which
they're still talking about them getting
the NHS. If you start putting it back up again to where it was, it's going to cost.
Yeah, but we're not in another Cold War. We're in a hot war at the moment. We're literally, the Western liberal democracy. There's war on our borders.
Absolutely. So, and Trump, whatever else you think of him, pretty much called it, didn't he? When he said you're not going to be able to count on America to bail you out indefinitely. At some point, the European powers are going to have to start inching their own responsibility for their own...
And now that it's happening in Europe, they are at least stepping up to the mark. Well, most of them. I mean, Britain's leading the way. Poland's close behind. I think France and Germany could do a bit more.
Apparently, Poland could get ahead of us on GDP by the end of the decade, according to some measures. What I'm be interested to see is how much of that money they spend on recruiting infantry foot soldiers and how much of it they spend on the high-end tech stuff. Well, I would kind of hope the latter, because that's where our expertise, that's where we're a world centre of excellence. And for whatever you think of the American military-industrial complex, which is, a lot of people say, responsible for the extent of permanent war for permanent peace, at least America makes lots of money out of it. Maybe we could set something up like that.
And also, arguably, war is changing.
Yeah.
And the different types of war, and it isn't necessarily about infantry. and it is necessary about having some of these right weapons and drones and fighting over the internet and all of that stuff.
VR headsets
and big machines that cost a lot of money. So tanks, Challenger tank, some of these new tanks are like $80 million.
Yeah.
So if you're fighting with drones and things like that, they're much cheaper.
Much cheaper. On the other hand, it's a bit like Formula One, isn't it? It costs a lot of money, but there's a kind of trickle-down effect into the high street weapons as well. You see that a few years later. The Independent, which is what Scotland won't be, if recent polls are believed.
So Sturgeon has been blasted for wasting 8 years, as a new poll shows that most Scots do not want another independence referendum in 2023. So she recently announced, she wanted an independence referendum next October. Yeah. But they did this poll. 53% of people in Scotland said there should not be a referendum next year. 40%, who are the ones who are going to vote to leave the UK, said there should, and the remainder were undecided. So, this really doesn't show much muster for Sturgeon's plans, which are obviously going to be scuppered anyway. And apparently another poll said that only 44% of people would vote yes anyway. So,
I mean, if you were to take the undecideds in that first poll and just distribute them evenly, you've got 54% roughly saying remain, which is roughly how it fell last time anyway, isn't it? It feels like there's been no change at all.
Yeah, and obviously since then we've had Brexit, but then I think the Scottish people, after 14 years of SNP rule, are getting wise to the fact that the SNP, they're a single-issue party. They're great at banging the drum for independence, but they're terrible for health, education, drug deaths, inequality, all the things that a devolved parliament was set up to actually deal with. So, they'd be able to put more focus on running the country that Westminster wouldn't be able to do. Instead, it's just created this golem, this satellite state that fights back against the centre.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost as if you're being sort of run by organised crime to some extent. I just always feel that, or like one of the old-fashioned Teamster unions in America or something. Yeah. The main difference would be under independence, you'd have Sturgeon and the same level of competence, but with a much lower budget. I think that's that opinion. What do you think, Josh?
No, it's good. I was actually quite inspired by Leo. Have you ever thought about running?
Didn't get in this time. It's a practice run. You're allowed to practice run.
Yeah. I really do hope they don't have another, because they are extraordinarily destructive and divisive, though, aren't they? These things, it did take some time.
I think Brexit worked out well.
Well, I mean, joking aside, that did cause the most extraordinary ructions. But even the Scottish referendum, for a couple of years, just as an English comedian going up to Edinburgh, for a couple of years, it just felt a bit less welcoming,
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
No, I've always felt very unwelcome.
Only the scales on my eyes. The Guardian next, and in an environment of pride, diversity and welcoming, it looks like the police are not welcome, Josh.
No. So Peter Tatchell, who was one of the people who started the first Pride, I think, in 1972, he's also sort of a commentator. He's been on this channel a few times. I disagree with many, many of his ideas, as I disagree with this. Is saying that officers would be welcome to join as civilians, but that the Met should keep away. One of the reasons there he's saying is that the Met is institutionally homophobic because of one of the examples he gives is that the way they handled the investigation into serial killer Stephen Paul. And actually, when you do look into that I don't really know much about it, but it was in 2014 and there was like 3 men were found in this one churchyard and it was like yards from this guy's home. So you sort of think, come on, like that seems like they really dropped the ball there.
They didn't take it seriously?
No, but you could also argue now, it seems like the Met and all the police forces around the world, but certainly in the UK, seem to be very heavily invested in proving their LGBTQ plus credentials with the constant photos with flags and marches and all this stuff. So, and also, like, you need police there. There's going to be thousands and thousands of people. That's ridiculous to sort of... And I thought, oh, well, they're obviously just talking about marching. No, they're also saying you shouldn't come. It's like, it's a safeguarding issue. When you have that many people, you can't
make any march a police no-go area just because you... But, it is counterintuitive to me. If anything, the narrative has been for the last few years, the police are beginning to make themselves look ridiculous with the degree to which they embrace the culture of whatever march or, when they go to carnival, they, start twerking and stuff. You're like... Be there, be there as police, not as some kind of outreach team,
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with Peter Tatchell, but for completely different reasons. I think the police should just get away from painting everything they own a rainbow colour and get back to policing. I mean, you can't, you literally, if you phone the Met Police because you've been burgled, and the Met Police was put under special measures recently because it's performing so terribly. If you phone the Met Police over burglary, you can't get them to turn up unless you've also been misgendered or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, that certainly does seem to be most people's opinion. I think Tatchell is going against the grain. And also, just him personally, which I do admire the extent, the way in which he's put himself in harm's way over the years in order to bring attention, focus to certain... like he's thrown himself in front of limousines of leaders of overseas countries where they are literally killing gays. And
he's
so
gone to Moscow as well got arrested with Right Said Fred.
But you don't survive that kind of thing unless you have a police force around. The whole point of that is that there's somebody there to protect you from being actually murdered. Well, I think that's a bit of a duff call from him. But that's our first third, anyway, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up, how hard can it be to pass the British citizenship test? I had a crack at it online today. I very nearly scraped in. Captain Tom Moore's family are in the firing line, and Buckingham Palace are failing to encourage diversity. Surely they are diversity, aren't they? They're Germans. Anyway, that's the second third. We'll see you shortly.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, and helping me get through tomorrow's news are comedians Leo Kearse and Josh Howie. Gentlemen, our first story in the second third is from The Times, and this is about throwing unelected crybabies out of Parliament.
Yeah, actual babies, though. So babies will be banned from the Commons after MPs complained that it would be a distraction and Parliament would not be taken seriously if young children were allowed. So last year, you might remember, Stella Creasy, another case of nominative determinism, possibly. She's the Labour MP for Walthamstow. She was rebuked by the Commons authorities for bringing her baby into work, and she was trying to make a point about, a lack of maternity cover. So she brought her, and people did say that the baby was perfectly well behaved. Because sometimes if you're next to a baby on a flight, sometimes it sleeps the whole time, sometimes it screams. But yeah, I agree. I think she's trying to make a point about maternity cover. But you're an MP. You've got so many expenses and things to claim. You can obviously afford for childcare.
Yeah.
So, just leave the babies.
There are, I think, measures available. She may well want to, suggest that they could be improved or that there might be a loophole she's falling through. But I have to say, the thing about her baby being well-behaved, that cannot be the criteria. You cannot have somebody kind of go, I'm sorry, that baby's fine, but that one is really starting to do my head in. That would
and the thing is, babies are a distraction whether they're well behaved or not. If they're asleep, they're gorgeous and you just kind of want to look over all the time. And if they're crying or whatever, it's incredibly stressful. And you can't focus in any way. People are making, people making speeches and whatnot. So she got a photo. I'm curious as to how she got the baby to be well behaved. I personally think she did a little bit of Calpol drugging.
Wow. Mediced or something. They used to be called Mediced, I think it was called.
Seems like her timing was a little bit too perfect.
Just coming back to me now. There was something, it was supposed to have a little bit of heroin in it. I can't remember. There was a rumour that went round.
What decade are we talking here?
This was only about 10 years. Well, I thought it was, she's 18 now, so I guess this was when she was in her first year. There was, I think it was called Mediced, and there was genuinely a rumour that it had something that was a little, it was probably an antihistamine or something.
You just try it yourself. But I do think that she has serious points about childcare in this issue. Certainly, I think, as Leo's about to find out, as being a new dad soon, from 0 to 4, childcare in this country is terrible. And it's ridiculous where you have to basically stay off work or you work for sort of an extra £1,000 a year more than it costs to pay for the childcare. It doesn't make sense.
Well, it's to create a placeholder in your career, isn't it? It's the only reason you probably want to do it.
But well, I think the real issue that Stella Creasy raised is why women get paid less than men. It's because they bring babies into the office and then everybody stops working. Well, the women stop working and spend all day looking at this baby. Yeah, they do all that. They do all that.
And then they used to do that to Stella Creasy anyway when she was in there.
And that's where the pay gap is.
There's a lot of truth that the pay gap does revolve around babies at that level, I would imagine. My wife, she is still gets a little drowsy in the car, which is a throwback to when her mother used to give her brandy.
Okay.
Genuinely, for long
It's not because you're spiking her, or
No, I don't spike her. And it would be it's a bit like gaslighting. Brandy in the tea.
She wasn't driving.
No, she can drive, she can stay alert. It's weird, but as soon as she gets into the passenger seat, out like a light.
Right.
So anyway, that could be one
your
for
music
Stella.
choices.
I think it might be something that the House of Commons could look at. They've got a decent bar there, haven't they? Rather too decent by the sound. Anyway, Friday's Independent now. How hard can it be to become a British citizen? Josh.
Pretty hard.
Did you ever have to get over any hurdles or any?
No, well, not British born and raised, but I do have a family member who had to do this test recently, and it is ridiculous. This is in the Independent, but they have to fix it. There's a report that's sort of come out, but there have been some of the questions are so silly, like some that no one would ever know, like where the founder of the UK's first curry house eloped with his wife. I don't see how anybody could possibly know that.
What?
Where did the founder of the UK's first curry house elope with his wife?
Is it Spain?
I don't know. I guess I'm
not that place up on the Scottish border. What was that called?
Gretna Green.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be there.
Look, you know what? A better person than I would have actually looked that up. But
so it's like a pub quiz sort of.
Well, so that's what they're saying. But then there are some questions that are quintessentially British, which I actually think should be in there.
Mate?
What do you do when someone spills your pint? Or when you spill someone's pint? I feel like that is those sort of questions. I'm like, that is the essence of Britishness or whatever. But then, of course, someone might get some...
slightly like the Blade Runner replicant questions.
Well, it is, because it's obviously going to be in different parts of the country. And if they've seen Trainspotting, they're going to have a very different answer to my local.
Or if they've read Sid the Sexist. Yeah. What would you do? What would your answer be to that?
I'm not sure. I mean,
spill someone's pint.
Well, I think if your pint is spilt or you spill someone's pint in England, you've got to apologise. Everybody apologises all the time.
Either way, if you get yours spilt or the other way around, you're going to apologise.
Eye contact and a sincere apology, and then assess whether or not this is going to escalate. And what are you going to do about it?
I'm sorry that you spilled my pint.
But they do need to do something about just ensuring that people who take citizenship, embrace Western liberal democratic values of equality and tolerance and not forming a grooming gang or committing any terrorist attacks. Some of that stuff, because some of that stuff goes on, and although there's not a lot on the grand scheme of things, I don't like any of it.
I suppose the point is you can ask somebody questions like, which I did do it. There's a thing you can do, like a mock exam online. So I did try a few, and one of them, for instance, was which of these is not a British value. One of them was fairness. One of them was respecting other people's opinions, and then one of them was driving a car. And so driving a car is not a British value. Okay, so that's fine. But just registering that those are British values doesn't mean that you're going to be able to internalise them, does it? I think there is a possibility there that it's kind of, well, that's done, he passed the test,
I think that what they should do is be forced to watch GB News
Yeah.
Their eyes open, like,
Yes.
you know, like chained
In
into
Alex.
the chair or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that.
In a queue. You've got to learn how to queue.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And not being able to queue is actually infuriating, even though we laugh at the queues as a sort of quaint old British custom. That is fair play in action, absolutely. That would be like the equivalent of the dog barbecue in the replicant.
Well, maybe it'll be that they queue up to get the test.
Yeah.
And that's the test itself.
I like your
if they
thinking.
stay in the if they stay in the queue
Congratulations, you're in.
and people try and push in, what do people say?
Yeah.
Anyway, well,
Nice.
you're welcome.
Sticking with the Independent, Buckingham Palace is failing to meet standards in the field of diversity.
Yeah, real shocker here. So Buckingham Palace has failed to hit its diversity target, which is 10%. And its proportion of ethnic minority staff stands at just 9.6%. So they really dropped the ball getting rid of Meghan.
Not just Meghan, the kids as well.
The kids,
That's
of
a
course.
couple of extra.
That would have brought them up to 10%.
Yeah, they would have been sorted.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I want to know, as well as this, what jobs... I mean, I don't expect Buckingham Palace to be, the most diverse place in the world. To be honest, I mean, it's a royal family. It's not a barbershop in Peckham. You're not gonna. It's not gonna be that diverse. But I want to know what jobs, because I don't want them to. I think when there's the first waves of immigration to this country, obviously the first migrants got given bad jobs. Cleaners and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I want to know that Buckingham Palace are, letting people have a pop at better.
But you're exactly right, because if they were to just employ 50 black cleaners or something, and just go, there we go, bish posh, job done, 12%, but none of them were above that pay grade, then that would feel like there wasn't exactly progress, wouldn't it? Because a lot of the so-called staff are actually quite posh people themselves, aren't they? I think in these places, they're virtually aristocrats.
Yeah.
But they
need the butler. They need the butler from Fresh Prince.
Yes, that would be it. Yeah,
he's posh.
There should be a way of if you've been set a diversity, like a target that you have to hit. There should be points not just for the number of individuals, but the scale at which they.
But this obviously is concerning them because the initiative took place with the support of a specialist inclusion and diversity consultancy to develop inclusion and diversity strategy. The household has a new inclusion and diversity group. That's 3 times using inclusion diversity within, within 3 seconds. So this obviously concerns them. 13% of the UK have come from an ethnic minority background. And, that makes sense. But as Leo says, I 100% agree, what roles are people actually taking up in the royal household?
Bread rolls.
And also this... Prince William said...
Sourdough.
Prince William said diversity is what makes us strong, but he didn't explain, why. Because some, if you go to China, so not ethnically diverse, and in fact they put people who are different ethnicity in concentration camps and use them as slave labour. But China's an incredibly, geopolitically strong country.
It is a good point, and it is always just given as a received wisdom now, isn't it? You're supposed to understand it. I have read some studies which demonstrate scenarios in which it is a strength, but you're very rarely allowed to question it and ask to see some evidence.
I think it'd be nice if they explained, it'd help people believe it if they explained why.
Absolutely right, yes, because it avoids groupthink or something, but that might not necessarily be a benefit if you're working in a royal kitchen. You might not want, lots of people questioning the orders. You know what I mean? You might not want people going, well, that's not how we do it in my family. You go, well, I'm afraid that's how we do it here. There are certain situations where actually groupthink is required if the Queen is to get the right sort of butter and marmalade combination on her toast. Do you know what I mean?
You've thought about this.
I have, yeah. I think 9.6%, it's so close. They should probably push for the 10 now, though.
Well, they've got to the end of the year, so...
Friday's Mirror next. It looks like Captain Tom and his legacy is facing yet more tarnishing, Josh.
Yeah, so this seems a little bit unfair, actually, the way this article is kind of worded. They make it seem like the family are being investigated themselves for running this charity badly, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. The way that the Mirror words it here is probe into Captain Tom's charity with daughter lined up for 100k a year CEO role. Well, that actually happened 6 months ago or so, where she tried to get this job for £100,000. That is ridiculous. The commission said, no, you can't, so she ended up going on as an interim for £85,000. That's still a huge amount of money, but that isn't actually what's going on here. They're saying that because his name was taken out, Sir Tom and all this stuff, so this other company had the trademark issues, and they're saying, well, why didn't you get them first? Because this company, which is Club Nuke Limited, which is kind of evil, they've made a lot of money by selling, I don't know, Captain Tom Fish Fingers or whatever it is.
I saw a bottle of gin.
Captain Tom.
Well, it was Sir Tom's gin.
Yeah, so they've got all this stuff, and it's not. So none of that money is actually going towards the charity. But because this charity actually wasn't set up until after Club Nuke had the trademark, it's not really their fault, and that's really the issue that's going on here.
Right. Okay.
And I'd just like to say that the 39 million that was raised by Sir Tom. That's got nothing to do with it. That went to a different charity. That's all safe, which is good because that's a massive relief. Did you guys donate to that charity?
I believe I did, although I look back on it now as a sort of mild case of hysteria, to be absolutely honest. But I think it was relatively benign, wasn't it, compared with standing outside and banging saucepans together for the NHS. I think this was one old fella. We rallied around it because it was a time of stress. There's been a lot of people on Twitter today saying, looking back and thinking, what were we thinking? This old fellow on a Zimmer frame and we gave 30 million quid. Well, I think what we were thinking was we were desperate for some sort of demonstration that we could show some sort of, unskilled...
Get behind it, Well, I was just jealous he had a garden.
Yeah.
That was that made me angry.
Jealous that he had a walking frame.
So his daughter, this isn't the £39 million that was raised for Captain Tom. So his daughter's in another charity.
Yeah, which is raised since then,
That's getting £100,000 a year.
Well, she's not getting it, but to be fair, also, to flip the argument I just made, last year they spent $240,000 just on costs running the charity. They only actually gave away $160,000. So that is not good value for money.
It sounds awful, but I'd like to see the figures for other charities. I don't know how much they had. I bet some of them are probably. I mean, a lot of the money seems to go on paying chuggers now, doesn't it? To stand in the street and
yeah, this is why I never give to charity, apart from not wanting to help anybody.
But I buy my books from Oxfam Bookshop. But that's mainly because I think I'm basically getting one over on them. I spot a second-hand book and I quickly check on Amazon to see how much it's going for, and if it's more on Amazon, then I buy it. So I'm basically stealing from charity.
No, I'm the same with board games. I collect board games, and if I find a board game that's I'm like, oh my god.
The silly charity, they don't know. I wouldn't have cost Captain Tom, though, But I did think it was quite... If there was anything I felt cross with them about, was they dragged him over to Barbados or something, didn't they? And that's where he caught...
COVID.
Died, that was horrific.
Right.
I mean, it was nice that they wanted to treat him, but that was fairly obviously not...
So that was a reward?
I guess so, and they all went with him,
Right. Because that must have been quite a strain on his body to fly that way to such a different climate.
Yeah, I think that was a bit wrong. But anyway, that's just a value judgment. The Times next, and our favourite brand. I say our favourite. I don't have a favourite brand of beans, but perhaps the most famous brand of beans is quickly disappearing from supermarkets.
Yeah, and from one of the most famous brands of supermarkets. So Heinz has stopped supplying Tesco after a row between the two companies about price increases on baked beans, tomato ketchup and other products, which I assume are not speedboats and things. It's going to be Heinz-related stuff. That's
been more like Lidl, the centre aisle.
Yeah. So Tesco's reserves of several of the company's products, including 4 packs of baked beans, salad cream, chicken noodle soup, they've already sold out on its website, and shoppers have reported empty shelves in store. So there's food inflation of 9.1%. Obviously, Tesco are trying to suppress that as much as possible, so food shoppers don't get charged so much. But Heinz, their costs are creeping up. With the energy and the cost of sunflower oil and wheat going up so much, and this is going to get worse over the next.
That stuff is in the sauce, is it?
I should imagine, yeah. I mean, sunflower oil is in a lot of stuff, but the price of staples around the world is shooting up because of the Ukraine conflict.
Yeah.
But I think Tesco's is arguing that they're putting up their prices just a little too much. Like if you look here. For Sainsbury's, where there isn't an issue getting Heinz tomato soup, 4-pack went up from $2.50 to $3.50. Now that's a third increase. That's not 10% inflation. And the same with £2.50 to $2.99 for a 4-pack of snap beans, snap pots. It went up 20%, not 10%. So, like petrol stations, where it's like you're going, I know it's going up, but you're taking the mickey here.
I had a little conversation about baked beans about 6 months ago on Twitter. I was complaining in Brighton, if you go to any remotely posh sort of artisan cafe and order a full English, they all think they can make better baked beans than you can get out of a tin, and you get these kind of white beans floating in a sort of tomato, what's that cold tomato soup
Gazpacho.
Yeah, like a gazpacho with some leaves
So you
on
don't
it.
get, like, just baked beans out of a tin?
No, they don't. They think they can do better, and they can't. They never can. And then this conversation evolved, and it turned out that most people now think Cross and Blackwell, I think, and Branston both make better beans than
really?
Heinz.
Right.
Yeah, a slightly richer, more full-flavoured
Give it a
sauce.
go.
So, yeah, this could be the opportunity that...
I'm the kind of guy who likes to try out new things, expand my consciousness.
And it's not just about taste with beans either, is it? Obviously, you know,
Texture.
there's the musicality as well that you want to be looking for. You know?
Yeah, making your own beans, that's nonsense. That's like, just like making your own Nutella. They've already perfected it.
This is exactly my point, and it is so infuriating when cafes feel they have to brand themselves somehow like that and sort of demonstrate. Coming up after the break, emojis used to be used as evidence in court. James Bond could be getting a modern makeover. And is it time we stop bullying the Germans? Gott in Himmel. Find out what that is all about in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, and Josh and Leo. This is the part of the show where we go through the slightly weirder stories of the night. Josh and Leo, tomorrow's Times. I'm sure you've sent emojis before now. You may have regretted or thought them cringeworthy, but what if they came back to haunt you in court, Josh?
Well, sure. In China now, you can use emojis as evidence. They found 150 cases where that has actually been used in evidence in court cases in China. And it is a little bit scary. This the latest one is that there was a rental dispute with a commercial tenant, and he got offered a rent hike or something like that, and he sent a smiley sun, and that was taken to be him agreeing to it, even though actually he hadn't. Now, I don't know what smiley sun... That's different from smiley face. I don't know if that means, smiley sun, like it's a sunny day, let's talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's let's watch the Teletubbies.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly
I've never seen smiley sun.
But that could be a Chinese thing. So there is obviously a danger there.
It was taken as acquiescence.
Yeah, it was, but there is a danger, of course, of misinterpretation when it comes to that. And at the end of the suggestion is type out your words rather than that. I mean, personally, actually, I resent using emojis. The only time I ever use emojis is when someone does an emoji to me, and then I feel like I have to kind of lower myself to their standard just to find the perfect one.
The ones that I hate, which I can't imagine cropping up in a court of law, are when people just laugh openly at the paucity of your argument. You know that one, they go, lol, I suppose you think X and then 3 cry laugh emojis at the end to demonstrate just how pathetic you are.
Is that the Heinz baked beans guy?
Yeah. I hate that guy. What do you think? Is it a viable means of communication that could be taken as legal document?
No, I mean, I think the courts and legislation, I mean, we shouldn't give the government any ideas. Like some of our bills that are coming through, the hate crime bill, the policing bill, some of them are so vaguely worded already. They don't need to muddy that even further by having smiley suns and thumbs up and things in there. But interestingly, I mean, maybe it's more suitable or more suited to China because like the Chinese language and kanji in Japanese is kind of based on emojis in a way, because you've got little symbols that mean like a man or a window or a rice paddy, actually making up they're the constituent building blocks.
It's character driven, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like a sitcom, yeah. I've never really fully understood it, I must admit, Mandra, but I know, I mean, they have like 2,000 characters on the typewriter or something, is that right, when they try and...
I mean, I did learn Japanese at school, weirdly. It's one of those things.
But you can see how they would absorb emojis in a different way. We still just think of them as like, this is what my face is doing while I'm writing this. Whereas they might be actually starting to use them in a more... like hieroglyphics, obviously, they're still... I mean, God, I can't exactly pass exactly how they are meant to be understood or read. It's more complicated than we think. But then our language, like A, B, C, those were originally pictures, right? A was a house, I think, and... A was an ox. It was it was almost sort of on its side.
It could well be 1,000 years from now, different emojis are actually going to turn into written language, like the,
there'll be a way of saying them,
the smiley face is going to be like a little thing, like that. It's,
because a lot of people
aubergine is going to mean...
Yes, not tonight, aubergine. There's been a long time, like a tongue-in-cheek campaign to introduce an irony font, so that when you can write a whole tweet in an irony font and everyone kind of goes, he doesn't really mean that, you know what I mean? But that could conceivably become legal as well then, presumably.
That would be so annoying.
If you had sunny, smiling sun, but in irony font.
You put the upside-down laughy face either side of what you're saying.
Yes,
so,
that's good.
That's the irony, sarcasm.
You're right, he's like the interrobang. So Friday's Daily Mail now, and this is another day and another story about trans people in the NHS. What is it this time, Liam?
Yeah, so this is a big move. So every child treated for gender dysphoria by the NHS in the last decade will have their medical records scrutinised to see if the NHS care is causing more harm than good, because there's been some cases recently of children and adults who've been through the transitioning process regretting their treatment and also opening lawsuits against the NHS. So this could be very costly for the NHS, and obviously hugely life-changing for the people involved if it turns out to be the wrong course of therapy. So Sajid Javid today is going to change the law to allow researchers to study data on around 9,000 adolescents who are given counselling or drugs, so puberty blockers and hormones. There's been a huge increase. There's 11,000 patients treated last year, and some of the stories are quite traumatic. And also their outlawing of conversion therapy actually means that you can't do the sort of talking therapy.
Well, that's what they were afraid was going to happen. Now in America it's different, but here, luckily, they did stop that. They made the conversion therapy illegal for homosexuality, but they didn't deal with this because that was exactly what was raised. Because if someone went in and said, I'm like playing with trucks or something, and then maybe I'm a boy. If you don't immediately do what's affirmation, then you are then yourself liable, which is the way it is in America. Whereas here, that was stopped, so it isn't like that. But it seems like people have been using this affirmative model anyway, giving drugs to very young teenagers, and those drugs
after like 2 sessions.
After 1 to 2 sessions, 1 session even. And the thing is that they said, these drugs, they don't do anything, these hormone blockers, it's just a temporary. But even that has been proved to have massive ramifications on bone structure, on brain development, sexual development. So, and there's the number. It was 138 children were referred for treatment about 12 years ago. Now it's up to sort of 2,000. It's insane. And the difference is it used to be young sort of boys, a couple of boys, and now it's mostly teenage girls, which suggests that it's a fad.
Well, the thing that is again, it doesn't always necessarily mean anything, the correlation, but the correlation is striking, the degree to which, as the trans thing has risen, anorexia has virtually disappeared.
Oh, really? I haven't seen that graph.
Yeah, and so the suggestion that this could be the way in which the same anxieties that used to lead to anorexia now lead to this, which is essentially wishing to withdraw from the oncoming
female puberty. That's the thing that reading this book that I'd never really appreciated. No, there's irreversible damage, and I'd never appreciated how traumatic female puberty is, because as a guy going through puberty, you get a little bit of hair and what your voice did, but for a woman, suddenly you're treated by society as this sexual object. You have a whole other appendage. You have breasts. You have this whole biological system going off with you. And it's a massive, massive difference between guys. And I'd never sort of seen that before. And as you say, some people decide to retreat, not necessarily because they want to be boys, but they just don't want that. Yeah. And it's understandable when you.
Of course, a male going through puberty, you want society to treat you, but you don't get it.
Friday's Telegraph now, and as the culture war rages, Disney continues to be a key battleground. Josh.
Yes. So this is interesting. That Bob Chapek, I think, who has basically been running Disney for a little while, who took over. He used to run the parks part of it. Now he's taken over the whole thing, and it's a huge enterprise, as you can imagine. They have reconfirmed him for another 3 years, even though actually it's not been particularly good business at the moment. I mean, obviously you had COVID. That's not his fault. Maybe not. I don't know if Disney started it. Possibly. Start that conspiracy theory.
That's a good conspiracy. I like that one.
But so the parks were closed. That's where a big chunk of their money comes from.
Right. And also their films as well.
Yeah, and their films as well. Yeah. Streaming was a massive success a few years ago, Disney Plus. Yeah. But that's slowing down now.
Right.
And also you have this Don't Say Gay law in Florida, which again is a slight misnomer, because it's not necessarily the parents don't want to be their children exposed to different sexualities. It's more, I think, that people are focused on this whole gingerbread theory, sex is a spectrum, 150 genders, woo-woo.
But Disney has come out against the legislation.
I think he tried to hold it back, but he got a lot of complaints from some shareholders, from some employees, and eventually had to sort of come out against it. Then they got taxed in Florida now. So,
but just to be clear, what is the story? What's the news story?
Well, the story is that they pushed him forward for another 3 years.
Right,
that's pretty much it. But he's got troubled times.
Yeah, and the profits have dropped 90% on his watch. So they've gone woke and they've gone broke, which we've seen with other companies. But what's interesting, as Josh was saying, we're seeing activist investors, and these aren't. It's not like we've got Greenpeace buying shares and pushing a certain way. This is big investment companies like Vanguard and BlackRock. They've got ESG, environmental, social, and governmental obligations that they make themselves, and so they push, and Disney employees push for the company to go woke. And you think if you're an investor, you want to push it to make money. So, if you see things that don't bother pushing any sort of, agenda and just want people to have fun, like the new Top Gun movie, doing amazing business.
Yeah. And I think it's $1 billion, his first $1 billion movie.
It's his most successful movie ever. And it is interesting, isn't it, just how old-fashioned it is, without actually, nothing offensive in it. And there's a female pilot, there's a black pilot. It's not like it's like some massive throwback. But it just seems to celebrate some quite traditional
It doesn't
values.
preach, and we're seeing this in so much entertainment. It leads with this obvious, preach, wearing its, Pride Progress flag in its wrist.
I did wonder as well whether, I know this isn't Disney's only, I mean, they've got Star Wars now, and, they've got a huge number of properties, but there was that kind of period when the Pixar thing in particular, was so strong. They were coming out with some amazing movies. It really felt like they were moving. They had really just kind of changed the game, really, for children's movies. And then they just seem to sort of plateau. I've just felt for the last few years there's been nothing that came anywhere close to like Frozen, let alone Finding
Wall-E
and...
Well, the latest Pixar movie, Lightyear, has bombed because it's pushing this woke agenda.
Well, that's it. And I'd say that spreads across all their different properties. So with Star Wars, you have it with, I'm personally a big, massive fan of Marvel, but the last couple of series they've been putting out, it's like they just, and the thing is, they crowbar this stuff in, focus on telling a great story. If it happens, it's in the background and you can, but there's ways of doing it rather than just going,
God, look, everybody, we're...
It's a girl with a sword. Now we're scared. Yeah. Friday's Metro and the famous 007, speaking of makeovers. Well, this is one that I suppose they're going to have to embrace to some extent, Leo, isn't it? Like reinventing Bond, because the last one, spoiler alert, he's dead, right? Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. Is he dead? Does he die?
He literally dies.
Right. Well,
you didn't miss out as well.
I didn't know that, but James Bond is being reinvented because apparently he died. Sorry for anybody. Also,
have you seen Sixth Sense?
And there's going to be years before the next 007 film, according to a producer. So Barbara Broccoli. Is that nominative determined? Found in a salad buffet.
The previous one was called Cubby, which I always thought that was like half. It was like a slightly. I don't know. It felt like a term for a lump of broccoli. Do you know what I mean?
Well, apparently
a cubby of broccoli.
Apparently, they invented broccoli. They crossed. Was it the cabbage with the sweet pea?
Yeah,
there was some sort of genetic thing, and they invented broccoli and got rich off it.
Have you been testing yourself for the UK entrance exam?
So they're posing some potential Bonds. So Idris Elba, he's come up a lot. He'd be great. He's
not in 2 years' time though. He's gone.
I think he's maybe a bit too old. Bridgerton actor Reggie Jean Page. I don't know. Henry Cavill. He'd be terrible. He's American. Aidan Turner.
English.
Is he?
Yeah, he does.
Well, he looks American. He looks too healthy.
He kind of a healthy
Bond.
He looks too.
Yeah, he's too chiseled.
He's too far.
Tom Hardy's too short. Kind of Tom Hardy.
Yeah. But then Sean Connery wasn't tall, was he?
John Connery was tall.
He was a Mr. Universe. Look, to be fair to her, she is a good. She's been working on it since the 70s. I know it's Barbara Broccoli.
Sorry,
but since I know it's nepotism, she inherited it from her dad. Yeah. But those last films, Casino Royale was a great relaunch of that character. They sort of chose a bit of Jason Bourne, threw that into it. So she knows what she's doing. I trust her. She's saying as a joke here, obviously, she's saying, "Oh yeah, I'd love the Duke of Cambridge to be the next Bond."
William?
Yeah, William. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, you know what, a bald Bond. I feel like I've gone on a diet on the right time. I don't think I'll be too old at that point, so we'll see how it goes.
I haven't had a good idea for a new Bond for a very long time. I'm just so out of touch with the new talent that's coming through or what anyone looks like, really.
Yeah, I think Tom Hardy's my favourite.
Really?
He's getting old now as well, isn't he?
He's my actually as well.
OK, never mind. Time Friday's Times. Is it time we stopped bullying a certain nation for losing 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup?
There might be an opportunity within this article for me to do some German impressions.
And Japanese.
Japanese, OK, don't you say
I love all that.
So, do you know Commando comics? Do you ever see them?
Remember,
because they've been running since like the 60s, I think, 1961. But they've been sort of... Here's another story of a thing that's... They're focusing now on not offending anybody, and then, of course, what are you left with?
But are they still telling stories of the World War?
They're still telling stories of the war, but it sounds like one of these people, he says... they say, oh, look, but in 2020 I did a story where this Polish soldier finds himself exiled to Britain at the end of the Second World War. Now, that is an interesting story.
Yeah.
Is that a commando story?
Yeah, good
question. I don't know. And so now they're getting rid of things like... and using expressions like, so no more, achong, got him, Himmel, and aye. Now, is aye, who is that?
I guess
Japanese.
That's a Japanese soldier, isn't it?
Yeah, they said men of Nippon flee, I remember in one of them.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Die British a pig. I do wonder, though, it's so decontextualised now. When I was growing up, I wasn't that mad into them. I think there was one called Warlord I liked better than Commander. But anyway, but I did get them occasionally. But I understood roughly what was going on because there were also war films every weekend. I would watch at least one war film on a Sunday afternoon, usually with my dad. I had... 132 scale soldiers mostly from the Second World War on little platforms, like the ones in Toy Story that you could set up in battle formation, had guns. I had a mate who had loads of ex-war, he had an actual Tommy tin hat, and a couple of, like a water bottle and whatever. All the kit, you know what I mean? It was all part that... I mean, now it's just so isolated. I don't know whether most 8-year-olds now have any contact with any kind of play acting opportunities or... Do you know what I mean? I just don't know where they would role play that idea.
World
in their
War
head.
II is a big thing for them.
I just
think
don't
it's all
think it
probably
does.
Marvel.
It's gone, isn't
stuff,
it?
Yeah.
No, my kids dress up and they do sort of Vietnam protests.
My kids are going to dress up as the police hitting your kids.
We should set up a play date.
But now they have, of course, got drones. So, you know, there is that. Anyway, that is all we have time for, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much to my guests, Leo Kearse and Josh Howie. A pleasure as always. We are going into the weekend now. Your host will be Mark Dolan tomorrow. I hope to see you in just over a week. Thank you very much. Good night.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for big guests, big opinions, and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions, and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Thursday night, and this is Farage at Live. Live from Lincoln, please welcome your host, Nigel Farage.
Good evening, it's Farage at Large. Tonight we're in Lincoln, another enthusiastic crowd. I'll be joined by the local MP, Carl McCartney. We'll talk agriculture, big farming county, food security and supply, solar panels, do we want to see them? And Martin Daniels, TV star, comedian and entertainer will join me on Talking Pine. But before all of that, let's get the news.
Good evening from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. A 14-year-old boy who repeatedly threatened to kill his stepbrother before being convicted of his murder has been named as Craig Mulligan. 5-year-old Logan Mwangi's body was found dumped in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Angharad Williamson, and stepfather John Cole were also found guilty and jailed for life. They'll serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years, respectively. Mulligan will serve at least 15 years. Senior Investigating Officer Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father.
It's incomprehensible that Logan had his life cut short in such tragic circumstances at the hands of those very people who should have been there to protect him. For Logan's father Ben, who stands beside me, today's sentences are welcome news. However, no amount of justice can bring Logan back or compensate for the grief that continues to be felt.
The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade. The move is in response to the threat posed by Russia. The figure is 2.5% of GDP, which is a measure of the size of the economy. The UK also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit in Madrid, Boris Johnson said the country has the power to repel Russia.
We need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Also at the NATO summit, President Biden said the US will support Ukraine for as long as it takes, adding the alliance is now more united than ever.
At this summit, we rallied our alliances to meet both the direct threats of Russia poses to Europe and the systemic challenges that China poses to a rules-based world order. And we've invited 2 new members to join NATO. It was a historic act, Finland and Sweden, 2 countries with a long tradition of neutrality and choosing to join NATO.
A former Scottish MP has been jailed for 2 years for embezzling nearly £25,000. Ex-SNP member Natalie McGarry stole the money from 2 pro-independence groups. The former representative for Glasgow East was convicted last month on 2 charges of embezzlement. The judge said the 40-year-old had betrayed those who'd put their trust in her. Thousands of travellers have had their holidays disrupted after Heathrow ordered the cancellation of 30 flights this morning. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked onto alternative flights. BT workers have voted in favour of strikes in a dispute over pay. The Communication Workers Union says it's the first national strike since the company was privatised in the 80s. General Secretary Dave Ward says he expects BT to offer a significantly improved pay rise by next week, or strike dates will be set. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now, it's back to Nigel.
Here tonight in Lincoln, with a very friendly crowd, at least so far. I don't know how long that'll last. And this is a great historic city. And earlier on today, I went out to Lincoln Castle to have a look around and to see one of only 4 copies of the Magna Carta in existence. Have a look, have a listen to this package. So today, Farage at Large comes to Lincoln, and where better to begin than Lincoln Castle, here since the time of William the Conqueror. We're about to have a guided tour. Come with me. Well, inside Lincoln Castle, unsurprisingly, is Lincoln Prison. This was built in mid-Victorian times, built to a very high spec, very high standard. I mean, not that I'd have wanted to have been in here. And here we have prison cell number 10. Many, of course, who think that a lot of people who've lived in number 10 actually ought to be in prison.
Well, this for me is a bit of a treat because I'm about to go into the room where there is one of the 4 copies, original copies, of the Magna Carta, signed, of course, by King John in 1215. We're not allowed to film inside, which is understandable. I've never been able to see one of the original copies of the Magna Carta, so I'm actually quite excited about it. We're off now on the medieval wall walk. We'll see the cathedral, the city of Lincoln, and get the best view of Lincolnshire that exists. So we're up on the walls. It's a big walk all the way round. Terrific views out over Lincoln, as I said already. And yeah, you know, here we are back in the country immediately after William the Conqueror comes and takes over. Well, that was great. So Magna Carta, that copy has been here in Lincoln since 1215 with a short break during World War II where it found itself being looked after in Fort Knox for safety. We're up on the medieval walls. You can see the magnificent cathedral, great view out over the city, over the countryside. This isn't the only hill in the whole county of Lincolnshire, but it's one of the few. But I tell you what, actually, as a place to come for a day out, it's terrific. Well, I have to say, I'm not working for the Lincolnshire Tourist Board, I promise you, but if you haven't been, it's a great place to come for a day out. Now, to matters of the current day. The news that's out today, Boris Johnson has announced that defence spending will increase between now and 2030 to 2.5% of GDP, something that was being called for very, very strongly by, not least of all, Ben Wallace, his own Defence Secretary. That is good. But there's other news out today that I find pretty shocking, and I say that because I'm here in Lincoln. It's one of those constituencies that goes back and forth between Labour and Conservative. It's been doing that for the last 50 years, but we're very much in a Brexit county. I think when you go out to the coast, you find 75% of some of the districts in Lincolnshire voted Brexit. Here in Lincoln City itself, 56% was the number. But one of the senses I got today, walking around Lincoln, was from people who said to me, look, we voted for Boris Johnson, we voted for Brexit, but we're not really getting back control of our borders, are we? I wasn't going out soliciting this. Members of the public were coming up and volunteering it. And is it any wonder? You know, over 250 people again yesterday crossed the English Channel. Another 100 crossed the English Channel this morning. But the really shocking statistic today is that deportations of foreign criminals have dropped to a new modern low. The reason is, of course, the ECHR and the Human Rights Act and lawyers stopping those deportations. There are now 11,300 foreign offenders currently living in communities in the United Kingdom who are due to be deported back to their original countries, but they're living out there in the community now. That, I think, is a shocking failure for a government that says it wanted to take back control. So my audience question tonight to you at home is, will Boris get a grip? Please let me know your thoughts, farage@gbnews.uk. Now, joining me is Carl McCartney, Conservative Member of Parliament for Lincoln. Thank you and welcome to the program.
Good to be here, thank you.
Carl, you're a passionate Brexiteer, strong Boris Johnson supporter. What do you say to those people that I met today, your constituents that I met today, you know, and they voted for you with great enthusiasm in 2019. You yourself have had a very up and down time here.
Indeed, yeah.
Stood and lost won, lost, won again. So it is very much a seesaw seat. But when you see 11,000 foreign criminals that haven't been deported, a big new government initiative today, Nigeria now. Nigeria will take our foreign criminals. I reckon there's about as much chance of that working as Rwanda taking people that cross the English Channel. What say you?
Well, unfortunately, as you've already mentioned, I think the lawyers are having a bit of a field day, those left-leaning lawyers, shall we say. And ultimately, yes, it's the Prime Minister, but also Priti Patel, obviously, in the Home Office, have been trying desperately to obviously move things forward. And I think that the British Bill of Rights, as it comes forward, will help achieve that.
Do you? Do you really, honestly and truthfully think that a British Bill of Rights, all the while we're still signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights, and where the European Court in Strasbourg will still have supremacy over our law? It doesn't work, Carl, does it?
Well, it's got to. We said this.
But we've been hearing this ever since you won the election. We've been hearing from Priti Patel. Now we hear life sentences for traffickers. None of this works. The Rwanda policy, was thrown out to the country. This will be the solution. It's failed. And there's no good you and Boris blaming lefty lawyers. The truth of it is, seems to me, that if we really want to get back control of our borders, we have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights and complete Brexit.
Perhaps I don't disagree with that, but going back to where you said it's failed...
You do agree with that?
No, I'm just about to say, I'm going to counter your saying it's failed. It's been delayed at this point in time.
Delayed?
And you and I both know why that is. And obviously, we've not given up on Rwanda and sending people there on aeroplanes, and that will come forward, I'm sure. A lot of work has been done, the agreement's been signed, and it will happen. But yes, there's always going to be opposition.
Should we stay...
And you know in politics, nothing happens overnight.
Should we stay part of the ECHR, Carl McCartney?
Not when we've got our own British Bill of Rights.
Well, you're going to have to do a bit of pushing and jabbing.
Indeed.
With Dominic Raab. Dominic Raab.
And there's plenty of backbenchers who feel the same way.
Well, you better do. Now, look, you supported Boris Johnson in that confidence vote. What I see is a third of people who voted for Boris in 2019 now actively dislike him. I mean, they actually call him a liar. They're not going to vote for him again. If you stick with Boris Johnson, you're going to lose this seat, aren't you?
No, I don't think so. One of the reasons I've got a 3,500 majority, the largest majority. In fact, if you add all my other majorities up, they still don't total 3,500. One of the reasons it's as large as it is because of Boris and because we said we were going to get Brexit done, that was the first vote after I was re-elected in 2019, on the Friday after the election.
But Boris was popular then. He's not now, is he?
Well, I think he still is. As popular as you may be in Lincoln High Street.
But I'm not the Prime Minister.
Well, he is, and I'd like to see him stay as the Prime Minister. And I want to see him lead us into the next general election. Because actually, if I was to put anybody from any side of politics in Lincoln High Street today, give it 10 minutes, Boris Johnson will be surrounded by people who want to, take a selfie with him, have his autograph.
No, people like... No. People like him.
That would happen for you, I'm sure.
But a third...
Who else within the realm of politics?
But a third of those voters... No, he's got charisma, he's got personality in his own very disorganised, astonishing way. But a third of Conservative voters now actively dislike him. That's the point I'm making. You've got to change leader, haven't you?
Well, we're halfway through this Parliament. At this point in time, there will be various things that will happen. Obviously, we've had a pandemic for 2 years that obviously has perhaps delayed some of the things that we said we were going to do in our last manifesto. As we deliver those towards the next general election, I'm sure that popularity will be regained and that we'll see the polls, more in our favour than they are currently at this point in time.
Well, I shall look forward to Rwanda working, to Nigeria working. I shall look forward very much indeed to the British Bill of Rights working. Carl, I love your confidence. I just won't be holding my breath, that's all. But I thank you for joining me here today at GB News. Thank you very much. Now, Lincoln isn't just a good destination and a famous place for what happened back in the times of medieval England. Something happened here in the early 20th century, of which the people of Lincoln are inordinately proud, and so they should be. This was the birthplace of the tank. And I went down earlier on today to see the tank memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, that was built to the tank, and it was put up here in the city in 2015. But it isn't just medieval history. There's something else here in Lincoln that's very, very special. Being the agricultural place that it was, engineering was a big thing here, the development of tractors, agricultural machines, and that led in 1915 to a very, very important development. It was the engineers in Lincoln that pioneered the tank, the weapon, of course, which in the end won us the First World War. And if you come into the middle of Lincoln, in the middle of this big roundabout, you'll see the history of how tanks were made, the engineers behind it, the men, the women that worked at this magnificent memorial. And this is a Mark IV tank. This was the tank that was first used at the Battle of the Somme 1916, used with huge effect by the end of the war. And what I like about this is it shows women at work. The big and terrible things happened in the First World War, but the advancement of women going out, earning wages. I really think it is a very fitting, very amazing memorial. Well, I'm joined by Jonathan Doog, who's chairman of the Western Front Association for Lincolnshire and North Lincolnshire. Jonathan, tomorrow is the 1st of July. It's a date that years ago was a big day in my diary. It's the anniversary of the first day of the Battle of the Somme, 58,000 British casualties, and there were people from Lincolnshire involved, weren't there, on that day?
Oh, very much so, Nigel. It's the most bloodiest day in the history of the British Army, even to this day. And the resonance of the 1st of July is that it was really the first time that the Kitchener volunteers, the lads who had responded to Lord Kitchener's, you know, your country...
Civilians, basically.
Exactly. Lads who had been civilians not much more than a year before, went into battle on that morning, and as you say, some 58,000 British soldiers became casualties in one day. And many people have heard of the so-called Pals battalions, the lads that joined up from communities and factories. And Lincolnshire's own Pals battalion was the 10th battalion of the county regiment, and they were known as the Grimsby Chums. And they went into action at a place called La Boisselle on the Somme, where a huge mine was detonated at just before 7:30 in the morning. And then there was a great rush to try to occupy that mine crater before the Germans could get there. And of about 850 lads of the Grimsby Chums that went into action that morning, 2/3 of them were casualties within the first hour or so.
Yeah, as I say, it doesn't have the same resonance because it slipped beyond the edge of living memory, but we certainly shouldn't forget it, and I know that's what you and the Western Front Association do. Now, the tank, this project, the Landship project as it originally was, how is it that it was Lincoln that became the birthplace of this machine, which arguably gave us victory and brought an end to the war?
Yes, as early as the spring of 1915, the year before the Somme, the British found that with a sufficient weight of artillery, bombardment, they could break into the German front line. But what they didn't have was the strength or the tools to break through and into the open country beyond. So the Germans were very good at counter-attacking. So by the time you'd broken into the German first line of defences, and we're not talking about single lines of trenches, you know, as the war went on, the German defences were up to 3-4 miles deep. There were acres of barbed wire entanglements. So what was required was a tool to not only break into the German defences, but eventually to break through them. And that is where the tank came in. And although the tank is very much associated with the army, it was actually a naval idea. The sort of man behind it, as ever, is Winston Churchill, who was First Lord of the Admiralty. And the first designs for the tanks, why the body of a tank is known as a hull, and so on, because it was all naval terminology. And William Foster and co. Were already building tracked agricultural vehicles.
Because it's Lincolnshire.
Because it's Lincolnshire, big agricultural county, and so the sort of knowledge was here in the city. And William Tritton, who at the time was managing director of Foster's, and a chap called Walter Wilson, who was a lieutenant given a rank. He had actually been in the Navy pre-war. He was the designer, and it was such a secret project that they were ensconced in a small room, which you can still go and visit today, in the White Hart Hotel up on the Bale near Lincoln Cathedral. And the first tanks were designed there, tested on the Common in Lincoln, and the Mark I tank, the one that had the 2 steering wheels on the back, which made them very unreliable originally, it was that first Mark I Lincoln-built tank that went into action on the Somme in September of 1916.
I tell you what, it's a fantastic story, Jonathan. I know Lincoln as a city is immensely proud of it, and thank you for coming and sharing that story with us.
Thank you
very much. Now, in a moment, we will talk agriculture. 30% of all the vegetables produced in our country come from Lincolnshire. But there are huge conflicts. What is government policy post us leaving the common agricultural policy? Are we going to rewild, as some seem to want, like Mrs. Johnson, or are we going to actually produce the food that we need? I'll examine all of that in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show, as Prince Charles apologises for slavery to the Commonwealth, renowned historian David Starkey returns to help us revise the revisionists. After the Prime Minister blamed Putin's toxic masculinity for invading Ukraine, broadcaster and former Page 3 girl Leilani Dowding asks, what is a man? Plus, continuing in the pursuit for justice, we are joined by Kiara Bird, a victim of Trudeau's vaccine regime. All that and more on The Mark Steyn Show, tonight from 8 o'clock.
We are in the rural agricultural county of Lincolnshire. And I'm joined by George Blanchard, owner of Bowthorpe Park Farm in South Lincolnshire. George, welcome to the programme. Now, generations of you, Blanchards, have been farming here in Lincolnshire, and you've farmed meat, and you've done cereal, and you've done root vegetables, and you've been very adaptable, and all the rest of it. We've left the common agricultural policy. We're now in charge of our own agricultural policy. Do you know where the government's going with this? Because at the last Conservative conference, Johnson said that up to 30% of our agricultural land would be rewilded. Build back beaver, I think is what he said. I mean, I know that's just nonsense in all my life, but there we are. But now we're saying, oh my goodness me, with Ukraine, there's all this grain stuck in Odessa, food prices going through the roof, affecting every family in the land, and disproportionately, of course, hurting those on the lowest incomes. So do you know where policy is? Are you now being encouraged to grow as much as you can or not?
We still don't really know. There is an ELMS, which is going to be the new agreement taking over from what was BPS when that ends, but we still don't know. There seems to have now, in the last week or so, been a ramping up of a food and productivity in agriculture to ensure that we've got enough food going forwards. But that is off the back of.
But you literally don't know what government policy is?
No, not currently, no.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. That is not good. One other big conflict that I'm sensing here in Lincolnshire and perhaps around the country is this great desire to have as much renewable energy as we possibly can. And of course, in terms of farming, that means solar panels. How much of an issue is that in this county?
Yeah, there's quite a few big projects been proposed in this county currently. Obviously, it's getting a lot of opposition, probably quite rightly so. Sites that started off with a very small area that was probably unproductive have then seemed to have grown. The issue is we've been being told by government for years now that we need to diversify and do something different, and food has always come down at the bottom of the agenda, and I think really it needs to go back at the top of the agenda with everything happening in Ukraine.
But there's good money in solar panels, isn't there?
Well, at the moment the market is so volatile. As you said earlier, farms have been in families for generations, and nobody wants to be the generation that loses it. So if you can fix down an income for the next 20, 30 years, you're going to go for it and take that.
You're not getting EU subsidy anymore, but you are being paid money to manage land and look over biodiversity and the environment. Just tell us, George, in a word, in a sentence, what is it you want to see us do with our agricultural policy now that we are actually in charge?
I want to see us being backed by government through good and bad, because ultimately farming isn't just a tap you can turn on and off, and it does have its peaks and troughs, and we need to know and have the confidence that when it does drop and it is in a trough, that the government is going to back us and help us out of it.
All right, well, George, please do your best to find out by pushing the government as to what the policy is, and when you do find out, come back on here and tell us, because no one seems to know. George Blanchard, thank you very much indeed. Now, Amanda Holden, my What the Farage moment for today, or at least one of them, is Amanda Holden, and she has said she likes getting compliments from builders on building sites, such as wolf whistles. Even if it's sexist, she doesn't care, she thoroughly enjoys it, and she hopes she's going to be wolf whistled well into her 70s. Don't know what you think, but I think good for you, Amanda Holden. Another What the Farage moment, this just, I don't know, well, I've got to use good language before the watershed, but the Home Office is continuing its push for compulsory pronouns for all civil servants. In a new email sent today to all customer services staff, those working in all departments, they're saying that it's very, very important that their preferred pronouns are used on their email signatures. This is an important step towards inclusivity in the workplace. Well, there you are. There you are. Let us move on to Barrage the Farage, where I get my chance. You get your chance to ask me questions. All I get is a Christian name, and you can fire any question you want at me. Beginning, Mark, with you.
Good evening, Nigel. We're 25 metres from the Ermine Street at the moment. It's an original route from London up through Lincolnshire to York. What's your opinion on what's happening with transport vis-à-vis the route of the original East Coast Main Line being upgraded? HS2 is even further away, 30 miles away from Lincolnshire. And the fact that the M11 was going to come up through Lincolnshire to the Humber Bridge, and it never happened.
Yeah, Mark, good points. Quickly, HS2, total waste of time and money. Exactly. What on earth are we doing wasting up to £150 billion on that? We could spend on other infrastructure projects to benefit tens of millions of people. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say, I suspect we're 25 yards away from the Roman road, not metres, personally, but that's just a personal thing. If we go back there. Look, the truth of it is that Lincolnshire's a lovely county. I've been here so many times over the years. It is a complete and utter nightmare to navigate. Just a nightmare to navigate. You all know that in this room. And yes, at very least, an M11 extension coming right up through the east of England, up to the Humber. That would be an absolute minimum, I would say. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. It would have... The hot spot that ends at Cambridge would have carried on further up into Lincolnshire. Yeah. And it would be easy for all the trucks that take all the salads and vegetables that are produced in South Links to get down to the capital and the rest of the country, and the ports, the channel ports.
Yeah, it's much needed. Mark, thank you very much indeed. Next up is Nick. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Nigel. Do you think it's time to remove the Barnett formula from Scotland to prepare it for it leaving the Union? Last year it was £33 billion, and obviously we take off their income tax receipts and their stamp duty contributions, and that'll probably come out, I estimate, around about £25 billion extra they get in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is we do spend more per capita in Scotland than we spend in England. The same could be said of Northern Ireland and Wales as well, but it's Scotland that's pertinent and relevant here. I don't know about you, I'm bored to death with Nicola Sturgeon constantly going on about this referendum. Yeah. It's not a referendum, it's a never-endum. I suspect there's a growing number in this room actually would probably be happy to see Scotland go. I do get the sense of that.
Let's have a national referendum.
I'm not one of them. I want the Union to stay. I want it to survive. I think the real answer is Barnett must be reinvestigated. It's just not fair on the English taxpayer. No. But I also think at some point, probably what Boris, if he's still there, but at some point, the Prime Minister of the country ought to call their bluff.
Yeah.
Ought to call their bluff, have that referendum, they'd lose again, and maybe that would be the end of Nicola Sturgeon. That would cheer me up no end, I can tell you. Thank you very much. OK. Next, we have Matthew.
Evening, Nigel. And for the viewing public at home, I should declare I'm a local Conservative councillor in Lincoln for Moreland Ward as well. My question is about housing. So for over 2 decades, house prices have risen far quicker than salaries. House building and increasing supply has also not kept up with the increased demand as the population grows. Demand-orientated policies have failed to redress this issue, and I feel that there needs to be a much more supply-orientated solution to these problems. But what I want to know, Nigel, is what you think we should do.
Well, had it not been for your Conservative government for the last 12 years, continuing with net migration policies that now are exceeding what they even were in Tony Blair's time, and if your population is rising, if you have to build a new dwelling every 4 minutes just to cope with the increased population due to immigration, you have got a massive problem on your hands. Part of the Brexit promise was we would get a grip on our borders and reduce the sheer numbers of people coming into the country, and that in turn would make getting houses, access to GP services a little bit easier. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, there is no question that we are going to have to build a lot more houses. And as somebody who is much more of a country boy at heart than a townie, that pains me. But it's just going to have to happen. Otherwise, we have a society in which young people cannot aspire to the things their parents and grandparents and generations before them had. I will just say one last thing on this, which is there are 1 million people, 1 million people on the social housing waiting list, and for them to see us spending £5 million a day on hotels for people that cross the English Channel is an absolute affront. And that's why I really entitled this whole programme, you know, will Boris get a grip? He needs to get a grip of these issues, otherwise your party is going to be toast at the next election. Thank you for your question. Right. Hannah.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
On the topic of monarchy, which British monarchs do you admire and why?
Queen Elizabeth II is, unbelievable. I mean, 70 years without any scandal from her, not so much the kids. And she's been wonderful. But of course, my favourite has to be the first Brexiteer. The first Brexiteer was Henry VIII. It was the break from Rome that actually led directly to the greatness of England. So Henry VIII, I have to say, is my favourite monarch.
Thank you, Nigel.
What's yours?
George III.
George III.
I'm currently reading his wonderful biography by Andrew Roberts.
Yep.
And he had to put up with quite a lot going on in his reign, which was nearly as long as our good Queen's.
Yes.
But also, interestingly, his son seems to be maybe on par with some of our current children. He was caught vomiting outside in public regularly. He threatened to kill himself just to secure a marriage proposal and kept demanding more money, and he was over £200,000 in debt, which is millions in this money.
Well, we have had our problems in the past with the royal family, but George III, I put back to you, Hannah, he did lose America, didn't he?
Yes, there was part of
Or was that a good thing?
Still hard to know, but that was quite hard at the time for him. But there were so many other achievements and things that he worked through as well.
Interesting. It's not a popular view. I haven't read the book. I have read other books by Andrew Roberts, and do you know what? I will read the book, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nigel.
And last up on this segment is another Nigel. It must be difficult having that name these days.
Yes, good evening, Nigel.
Good
I think
evening.
we're a dying breed.
Yeah.
Do you think Boris will call a snap election as a last throw of the dice?
Right. Before I answer that, can I get an immediate audience reaction? Would you like to see a general election this September? Yes or no? No. Who thinks yes? Yeah, OK. Overwhelmingly no. As Brenda from Bristol famously said on that TV clip, oh no, not another one. Let me say this to you. If Starmer was to get a ticket from the Durham police, I doubt he will. I mean, Cummings didn't, although he was testing his eyesight, wasn't he, by driving through it? Yes. Perfectly reasonable, I'm sure. If Starmer was to get a ticket, the Labour Party would be in chaos. They would have a long leadership process to go through. And it's against that background that the rumour of a September general election is being talked about. Even if they were the circumstances, I think the public would say this. I think the public would say, we don't need a general election. You are halfway through. You have a whole host of promises that you made that you must deliver. And if you call this election, Mr. Johnson, you're doing it for your benefit and not for the benefit of the country. And I think if they did it, it would be a disaster for them. That's my view. What do you think, Nigel?
Well, I'm politically homeless at the moment. I voted Labour all my life.
Yes.
But following Keir Starmer, all that he tried to do to undo the result of the referendum, obviously I'm not going to be voting Labour anytime soon. I've never voted Conservative. My dad would turn in his grave. So you need to make a comeback, I think.
Thank you.
Obviously I did
OK.
vote
In a moment, it's going to be Talking Pints. I'll be joined by Martin Daniels, star TV presenter, comedian, entertainer, and, of course, formerly a presenter on BBC Radio Lincolnshire. All of that in just 2 minutes' time.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Without doubt, my favourite part of the show, it's Talking Pints. I'm delighted that Martin Daniels has joined me.
Cheers.
Welcome to GB News. Very good to see you. Oh, that's better, isn't it?
First of the day.
Well, no, I can't say that.
Yeah.
Nearly. No, not quite. Martin, it must be a family trait, mustn't it? TV entertainer, magician, entertainer. First thing I wanted to ask you, when you got a dad who was as famous as yours was it not very difficult to try and sort of fit into those feet?
100%, yeah. I remember when I first started out, I was doing a venue somewhere down south, I can't remember. I was about 18, I think, and I turned up at this club, and as I walked in, there was a poster in the door, and the poster read, "Tonight, introducing in cabaret, Paul Daniels' son." I didn't even get a name check. I wasn't even on the poster, so I was saying very young, but I just thought that's not right. It's not fair on him. It's not fair on me. It's not fair on the people. So I decided to. I took a deep breath and I got in my car and drove home. And I had to wait till Monday morning because before mobile phones. And I rang my agent at the time and said, "Oh, I didn't do the show last night, and this is the reason why." He said, "Oh, I already know." He said, "I've had the News of the World on."
Yes.
Chasing it up. And then they rang me and said, "We're going to do this story about how you and your dad don't get on." And I said, no, I said, "I just wanted to be able to stand on my own 2 feet, you know, and try to put my point of view across."
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, well, it's too late now. The story's already written. So we're going to go with it on Sunday." So... But it was great for an unknown...
Good publicity.
Double-page spread on the News of the World.
Yes.
And they decided to...
Yeah, and not all double-page spreads in the News of the World were good news, were they?
No, certainly not. No. But he talked to me again and said, actually, he said, "We'll do another story next week and we'll do it from your point of view." So I got another double-page spread in the News of the World that was done from my point of view. And then my agent rang and said, "Oh, this venue, they want to book you back." And so I turned up and he said, "I'll come with you just in case there's any trouble." We got there, the car park was rammed. There was twice as many people as in there as was originally there. And when I was introduced to the audience, it's the first time I'd got a cheer for walking on, but it was the tension that had built up because of the backstory. And I hadn't prepared anything, but I walked on stage, and then there was the silence, and I think that's what got to me, because they were, what's he going to say, what's he going to say? And so I started the show by saying, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul Daniels' son." Just to bury the hatchet and try to get away with it. But I thought that it would go away, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it never did. Even when I had I got my own TV show back in the 80s. It was in colour.
Yeah, well done, you.
But even then, you know, when I was on every week back in the day, they would still write Martin brackets son of.
So you never got away from it. No. Well, that must have been hard. But hey,
it was just because he was such a huge star.
No, he was. No, he really, really was. But you, I mean, at a relatively young age, you know, there you were helping to present Game for a Laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in your early 20s. It's Jeremy Beadle. I mean, just think back to those days of television. I mean, how many people were watching that?
Oh, gosh, we were getting 18 million viewers every week. 18 million. You know, what would anybody give for 18 million viewers now?
And there was no internet and no cable. And...
No, I think there was 4 channels. And I tried to explain to my kids, I think when England were playing Italy in the Euros final, I think there was something like 22 million people watched it. And I said, the country came to a standstill to watch this game. I said, there's only 4 million more than we were getting week after week after week in the time. So television, the country would stop for certain shows.
So you did lots of telly all through that period of time.
Yes.
What was Jeremy Beadle like to work with?
Superb. He played he knew his role. He was the pantomime villain, and he played up to that. But real life, genuinely lovely man. Gave me some great advice because the show was already his.
Yeah.
They'd already done a couple of series of it, and then they had a cast change. So he was the only one that had stayed. And so we 3 that joined, we were joining his show. And there was no sort of animosity about, you know, I've got to hang on to the headlines. He was so generous and so, you know, encouraging to us to go for it.
You've done, I think about your career, you've done telly, and, you know, you've done...
Those were the days.
But you also like the stage.
Yes.
You know, panto and all those sort of things.
Yeah, great. I'm just up the road this year, up the Ermine Way. Up in Grimsby,
which is 25 yards away from where we are.
25 yards away, yeah. Up there in Grimsby Auditorium, doing what we're doing this year, Sleeping Beauty and the Whinging Wicked Witch.
Very good.
I always say it's different shows, same show, different frock.
And you've done, but you like doing comedy. You like doing magic, of course.
I do a bit.
I mean, you're an all-round entertainer. What do you really enjoy doing?
Probably the comedy aspect of it. My sort of hour-long show is probably about 35 minutes of comedy, and then audience participation and a bit of magic.
But comedy's tough now, isn't it?
Oh,
I mean, what can you tell jokes about without causing offence?
Well,
without getting arrested.
You could say good evening and somebody would get it. It is so hard now. People say to me, how often do you change your show? I mean, I try to change it every night because I talk to the audience and bounce off them, and it's sort of Mickey taking, it's banter, which is almost a scary word nowadays. Yeah. And so you want to take the mick and poke fun at people or poke things with a stick. And is that me that's making that?
I don't think so, but if it is, just keep going anyway.
Go for that. So yeah, you're right. I had somebody come up to me not so long ago actually, and he'd been on stage with me the night before, and I was on a cruise ship, and so you live with your audience there for a few days after your show. And he came up to me, he said, "Oh, I'm glad I've seen you." He said, "I was on stage with you last night. I thoroughly enjoyed it. My wife, kids, we all had a great laugh. It's made our holiday." I said, "Oh, I'm glad you've enjoyed it." He said, "Yeah," he said, "because there's a lady just come up to me and said, you were the gentleman on stage last night with Martin Daniels. I just wanted to know, I've been and complained on your behalf."
Yeah.
So I give in.
But it is difficult, isn't it?
For sure.
Do you have to really think your content through now carefully?
Yes. But sometimes when you say things off the spur of the moment, off the cuff, there was a fella, I was on stage the other night, and a fella, somebody walked in late, right across the front, and the guy had no hair.
So it's perfect for you.
So I said something about, "Oh, look at him, he spent all day doing his hair, then forgot to bring it." And then I then read the next day in the paper that doing a bald joke now constitutes sexual harassment.
No. There you are.
What
a terrible person you are, Daniel.
I don't realise.
I mean, people thought I was shocking until you came on this show.
I'm a controversial, nasty piece of work.
It really is difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, got to talk to you about Martin, Lincolnshire. So
Yes.
You weren't from here, but you came here nearly 25 years ago. You're still here. What is it about Lincolnshire that you like?
I've been here for 24 years.
Yep.
And when I first moved, the locals said to me, "Don't worry, it's the first 25 years that's difficult." So I've only got one more year left to be accepted. But no, I found it very accepting. I came here I did 7 pantomimes at the Theatre Royal in Lincoln. And I just fell in love with the place and thought it'd be nice. And then I got married and was about to have children. And I thought I would rather be married with children here than as I was then living in West London. Not there's anything wrong with living. I lived in Kensington, which was fabulous. So I sold up there and bought a nice place here in Lincolnshire.
What would that house in Kensington be worth now?
Oh, about 5 or 6 million.
Yeah, probably right.
And maybe a little bit more.
But it's been a good place to bring up family.
Excellent. Yeah. I wish I'd kept my house, but I did well on the sale. But then the divorce lawyers balanced it all out.
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing. We had Jim Davison on the other week, and he's had 4 divorces.
I always think we split the house 50-50. She got the inside, I got the outside. It was all fair.
And whilst you've been here in Lincolnshire, you spent many years involved with BBC Radio Lincolnshire.
Yes. I was very lucky in that I managed to get a job with the BBC Radio Lincolnshire when my kids were at primary school. And so it kind of took me off the road. I stopped touring and travelling on cruises, that sort of thing. So first couple of years I was on in the morning, so I would get up early and be gone before they went to school. But I was always there to pick them up from school. And then a couple of years later I moved into the afternoon slot, and so I was able to take them to school in the mornings and give them a normal life, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, nice. And that connection with local radio.
Yeah. I think local radio is very important. I really do. There's a lot of people poo-poo it, and it's getting. All local radio stations are having a hard time with funding at the moment, and But I do think that local radio plays a very important part in people's lives.
Yeah, it matters to people, doesn't it? It matters to people a very, very great deal. And that relationship on radio is very personal with the listener, isn't it?
Yes, because television is something that's in the corner of the room, and radio is in your head. Radio is like a voice in your head. It is immensely personal, and day to day, you know, people. It was years ago that I left there, and people still talk to me about my kids when they were at school and the things that they did that they remembered me talking about when I was on air.
Because it really matters, yeah. Well, I can tell you, you're not just on telly right now, because, of course, GB News is there on digital radio.
Back on the radio.
And it works, and it works, and it works. And obviously, for us, it's a challenge, because you can't just say, look at this, you've got to say, look at this and listen to this. But it does seem to work. Just a final thought on all the things that you've done, Martin. Cruises, you've been on the cruise ships doing that. Isn't that very difficult? I mean, you're stuck, as you said earlier, you're stuck with the audience.
We're not stuck here.
I mean, what happens? How do you? I mean, you go for breakfast and they come and say it was great or it was awful.
Yes. They can say that. I was. I can't remember where I was, but I'd done my show the night before, and there was a bus taking people from the port into the town centre, and I was sat reading my book, and behind me I heard a fella in the seat say, "Did you see the show last night?" And you think, "Oh no, here we go." And the guy went, "Yeah." He said, "Did you like him?" And I still don't understand the answer. He said, "Yeah." He said, "He was all right, so long as you like laughing." I don't know whether that was a compliment or not. I've never been able to work it out.
On that note, Martin, thank you for joining me on Talking Minds. Now, so this Farage at Large, we take this show out round the country, and the reason's very simple. It is that we are the people's channel. We're not just stuck in there in London. We want to get out and have real audiences. And I have to say, I think it's been working. The audiences, I think, are enjoying it. Are you enjoying it? Yeah. All right. I admit it, we paid them to say it, but hey, it worked. We will be next Thursday evening in Redcar. We'll be in Redcar doing this kind of format of a show. Please, if you want to come, gbnews.uk. Please go there. Now, in the House of Commons, earlier this week, there was a funny moment. I never thought Dominic Raab had it in him to be funny. But there was a funny moment, wasn't there, when he winked across the dispatch box at Angela Rayner. It really was quite something. And I thought, well, it might be appropriate for Marty Clark, our singer, who's with us today, comes from North Lincolnshire, to sing Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. Take it away, Marty.
You're just too good to be true. I can't take my eyes off of you. You'd be like heaven to touch. I want to hold you so much. At long last, love has arrived, and I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true. I can't take my eyes off of you. Pardon the way that I stare. There's nothing else to compare. The sight of you leaves me weak, and there are no words left to speak. And if you feel like I feel, please let me know that it's real. 'Cause you're just too good to be true. I can't take my eyes off of you. I love you, baby, and if it's quite alright, I need you, baby, to warm those lonely nights. I love you, baby. Trust in me when I say, oh, pretty baby, don't bring me down, I pray. Oh, pretty baby, now that I've found you, stay. Let me love you. trust in me when I say, oh, pretty baby, don't bring me down, I pray, oh, pretty baby. Now that I've found you, stay and let me love you, baby. Let me love you.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather updates. Friday brings more showers, more heavy showers as well. A bit more of a breeze blowing tomorrow, which means the showers will tend to move through a little faster. The showers at the moment are very slow moving. Not everywhere seeing them today, but the isobars are very well spaced. This weather front will approach and bring some wetter weather for the weekend. But for the time being, as I said, it's all about the showers, dodging those downpours, some slow-moving, heavy, thundery showers out there, creating some problems on the roads, a lot of spray and surface water. Easing from Wales and southwest England overnight, but some more heavy downpours likely over the Midlands and northeast England. Elsewhere, becoming mostly dry, temperatures 10 to 13 Celsius. The details for Friday. It's messy. We start with a lot of cloud and rain over northeast England, and we see more rain pushing into northeast Scotland and across the Northern Isles. Elsewhere, for many, it's a dry start tomorrow, but then look at that, the showers just get going, and again, they'll be heavy and perhaps thundery in places. With more of a breeze, they will move through. The main focus by the afternoon, eastern England, northeast Scotland, Wales, southern parts of England, southwest Scotland looking a little drier. Temperatures might squeak into the 20s between the showers across eastern England, but mostly we're in the high teens. And then that next weather system we saw earlier on will move into Northern Ireland on Friday evening. Heavy rain, gusty winds, and that then moves across Scotland and into England and Wales for the weekend. Some uncertainty about the exact timing of it, and it does look as if East Anglia and the southeast will stay dry on Saturday with decent spells of sunshine. But elsewhere, cloud and rain moving in, and it's followed by showers, certainly for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Wales and southwest England looking mostly dry on Saturday afternoon. Again, temperatures mostly only in the high teens, maybe into the low 20s with some sunny spells across the southeast. Sunshine and showers again on Sunday. Showers mostly in the north and the west, looking largely dry on Sunday across the south.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good evening and welcome to Headliners. I am Simon Evans. Very shortly, my comedy guest and myself will be taking you through Friday morning's newspapers. But first of all, here's the news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The government's Deputy Chief Whip has resigned following a drunken incident. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Christopher Pincher said, "Last night I drank far too much. I've embarrassed myself and others, which is the last thing I want to do, and for that I apologise to you and to those concerned. I think the right thing to do in the circumstances is for me to resign. I owe it to you and the people I've caused upset to do this." A mother, stepfather and teenager have all been given life sentences for the murder of a 5-year-old boy. Logan Mwangi's body was found in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Angharad Williamson, and stepfather John Cole were found guilty and jailed for life. They'll serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years respectively. 14-year-old Craig Mulligan will serve at least 15 years for killing his stepbrother. Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father. The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade in response to the threat posed by Russia. The UK also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit, Mr Johnson said we need to explode the myth that the alliance has provoked the conflict.
If you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Meanwhile, NATO's chief, Jens Stoltenberg, said the move to boost troop numbers in Eastern Europe will ensure Vladimir Putin doesn't miscalculate NATO's readiness to respond.
We also know that this can get worse, because if this becomes a full-scale war between Russia and NATO, then we'll see suffering, damage, death, destruction at a scale which is much, much worse than what we see in Ukraine today.
Russia has withdrawn its troops from a Ukrainian island in the Black Sea, which it captured at the beginning of its invasion. Ukraine hailed it as a strategic victory and says it drove Russian forces out of Snake Island after missile and artillery attacks. But the Kremlin says it withdrew its troops as a gesture of goodwill to allow grains to be shipped from Ukraine. Back to the UK, and airline passengers have hit out at the total chaos at Heathrow after the airport ordered 30 flights to be cancelled during the morning peak. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers, with some travellers only finding out their flights were cancelled when they arrived at the airport. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked onto alternative flights. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Simon and headliners.
Hello and welcome back to Headliners. Joining me tonight in the Headliners arena are comedians at the top of their game, Leo Kearse and Josh Howie, the dream team. Slightly too much blue cheese, but a dream nevertheless. Very nice to see you, gents. One of you's come from Ministry of Defence, I think.
Yeah, we're just filming that, so it's going to be broadcast on Saturday, 8 p.m.
You are currently Mr. GB News. You've got the double. And,
I'm
Mrs.
GB
Mrs.
News.
Yeah, Ms. Master GB News.
Ms. GB News.
It's 2022.
Who did you have on this week?
It was Lewis Schaefer, and on the other side, Dan Spencer, the regular captain, and Stephen Grant.
Fact, Stephen Grant and Lewis Schaefer, that is going to be that's going to be like a high energy. That could be almost unbearably zingers ahoy. Excellent. Well, we've got a batch of front pages to take a look at. Let's see what's on the Telegraph's front page for Friday morning. The Tory whip quits over drunken groping. That is a major story we'll be going into very shortly. And one of our few remaining tennis hopes pictured there alongside it. Obviously a completely different story. Then we have on sterling as trade figures record. And Supreme Court delivers blow to Biden's climate pledge by curbing EPA powers. Typical, slightly confusing bad news from the FT. The Daily Mirror has top Tory quits over drunken groping claim and innocent lost in House of Evil. Again, that horrific story of child murder. The Sun with Tory quits over drunken gropes. MP pinches shame, bit of nominative determinism for him. And Taylor to wed Brit Joe, that is Taylor Swift, if I remember correctly. The Metro have Logan's teen murderer with some pride celebrations to offset the misery created by that story. And the Daily Star have zeroed in on Bernie Ecclestone's car crash interview on Breakfast TV this morning. Nurse Bernie's out of bed again. He was defending his old pal Vladimir Putin. Loyalty, if nothing else. Those are the headlines. Let's have a look and see what's inside. So let's start off with that gruesome and grim story from tomorrow's Sunday and indeed elsewhere.
Yeah, so the Tory party deputy chief whip has sensationally quit tonight after allegedly drunkenly groping two men last night. So he's called Chris Pincher, which, as you point out, is nominative determinism. Don't hire somebody called Davy Buttock Grabber.
No, and then give him the whip as well.
They're letting him keep the whip, which he's been subject to a probe in previous years. I mean, the double entendres just keep coming. But yeah, it's the second time he's been forced to quit the whip's office over sex allegations. So in 2017, he was accused of making a pass at a former Olympic rower, like a pound shop Harvey Weinstein. That's Chris Pincher, not the rower. But yeah, he massaged this athlete and Tory activist's neck and whispered, "You'll go far in the Conservative Party." So yeah, quite creepy stuff. But some papers are referring to it as claims. The claims are coming from him. He's written a letter.
Yes.
So he's admitted to it.
Well, he certainly admitted he got terribly drunk last night, and other people have said that his behaviour was out of order. I didn't see anything in the letter in which he acknowledges what he did when he was drunk, but it sounds certainly as if you can join the dots.
Yeah, but it sounds like other Tory MPs dobbed him in, because it's a Tory members' club, and then...
Yeah.
So he was dobbed
the
in.
Carlton Club, isn't
yeah,
it?
and they're sort of saying, oh, it looks like he's going to keep his whip because he admitted it, and he's fallen on his sword. It's like, yeah, but you've admitted it after. It's not like you woke up this morning and went, oh, I'm just going to resign today. Last night was crazy. It's like they obviously got some complaints, and then he was like, yeah, that was me.
Falling on his sword is another unfortunate. Do you feel that it's a crime that would be more suitable to resigning from causing a by-election? Is that what you're saying?
No, well, I mean, it's not. Certainly, this is the second time it's happened.
Yeah.
I mean, and this coming on the back of the other Tory MP who was found watching pornography.
Coming on the back of? You're just... can't believe this, Josh. Am I being tested here? Is there some kind of... one of these guys who's going to lose his licence?
I wish that was intentional.
He shot someone else's by. Let's move on. We have another story from the front page. This is Russia waging war on the continent. Defence spending is on the agenda. They're looking to ramp it right up.
Yeah, so this story in The Guardian, it's been going actually for a couple of days because, at the beginning of the week, someone in number 10 said, we're probably not going to meet that 0.5% above inflation for the defence spending.
Yep.
And then Boris Johnson was like, no, because it all kicked off. And now he's basically saying that it will increase to 2.5% of GDP by the end of the decade. So that's kind of like he's sort of promising... I mean, I wouldn't trust Boris Johnson to do a promise in 5 minutes, let alone keeping a promise for 8 years' time.
Well, it's certainly going to stretch beyond what is any reasonable expectation of his own tenancy at number 10, isn't
exactly.
it? But I suppose as a statement of intent, it's significant.
There are issues that are happening. You've got here the vital capabilities like future combat air. Which I'm not really sure what future combat air is. I'm assuming it's future air combat.
Sounds like a really good Korean film.
Yeah, I'll watch that.
Might be Prince Charles.
Yeah.
Combat air. That might be Prince William, actually. I mean, the one thing, I saw a graph a couple of days ago, and it wasn't necessarily in anticipation of this particular conversation, but it was the extent to which defence spending has declined, especially since the end of the Cold War, essentially, since we felt we won that.